Japan is home to one of the world's oldest populations, and they're not aging gracefully. The country is in the grip of a pensioners' crime wave. What sort of things were you shoplifting? Do you like lipstick?
No.
More than a quarter of people arrested here are over 60, most of them for petty theft.
今日本の刑務所は結構優しくなっていて、介護施設みたいな扱いを受ける。
As traditional families are pulled apart by modern life, the elderly are increasingly isolated, causing some to turn to crime. Why did you want to go back to prison?
もう寒くてもう行くとこなかったよ。
Japan is struggling to figure out what to do with its most vulnerable.
一度蓋に落ちたら這い上がれない、なかなか這い上がれないです、この社会。
I'm in Tokyo, Japan, one of the biggest ultra-modern megacities in the world. But this metropolis hides a demographic challenge. Japan's population is aging rapidly. And its criminals are aging too. Arrests of elderly people have risen fivefold in over just 3 decades. And more than 2/3 of them are arrested for theft or shoplifting of everyday items. I've come to a grocery store to meet people on the front line of this elderly crime wave. The store manager, Mr. Sukui, is trying to clamp down on the pensioners hurting his bottom line. How big a problem is shoplifting here?
やはり万引き行為というのは犯罪ですし、我々も被害で、出た金額というのは本来であればお客様から売り上げを得て従業員に支払われる給料であったりとか大事なお金です。
He's hired a new breed of store detective known as G-men. Mr. Itoh, or Itoh-san as you'd call him in Japan, is on the prowl looking out for early morning thieves. After just 20 minutes, he's spotted a suspect. An elderly lady with a shopping trolley is putting some items in a bag. At the checkout, his suspicions are confirmed. As she leaves the store, Itoh-san makes his move.
おばちゃん大丈夫？もうわかんないの。これ出してみなこれ。入れたやつも何個も入れてるの見てるからさ、また事務所行こう。
She's escorted back inside, where the detective questions the elderly shoplifter.
おばちゃん、払ってないやつ自分で全部教えて。お寿司もそうやろ？
The woman, in some distress, explains she lives alone. Her husband has died and her children have moved out. She says her pension isn't enough, so she shoplifts some of her food.
はいはいはい。
She's frail and lonely, and her daughter has refused to bail her out. This time, Itoh-san and the store manager decide to let her go. It's a very sad situation, in truth. This is a woman who Itoh-san has caught here before, and he says he thinks she's about 95 years old. And this is a story that is being played out across Japan at the moment. So tell me about this case.
結局警察を呼んでも迎えに来れる人がいなかったりすると、そのまま刑務所に入れなきゃいけないんだけれども、あまりに高齢すぎるので、それも警察は嫌がる。
Itoh-san is not very sympathetic.
まあ私にとっては日常的で、実際商品を盗んだ商品を出すように言った時には全部一気に出さない。あまり同情することはないですね。
Why do you think this is such a problem with older people?
お店にもよりますけれども、60% から 70% くらいが65歳以上であると思いますね。今日本の刑務所は結構優しくなっていて、介護施設みたいな扱いを受ける。で結局ご飯は3回自動に出てきて、で病気であれば介護もしてもらえるっていうので、いわゆるシャバにいても辛いことばかり、お金がなくなったりとか、そういう人に迷惑をかけるとか、そういうのが刑務所に行けば全部やってもらえるから。
This time, the elderly shoplifter was let off, but she might not escape so easily if there's a next time. She's just one of more than 25,000 pensioners caught stealing in Japan every year. Some people in Japan are so desperate that they will go to extraordinary lengths to try and go back to jail. I've come to meet a man who did everything he could to get arrested. I've come to Fukuoka in the south of Japan. Huboku is a welfare home for the elderly, and they start every day with exercises. Stretching to the Radio Taiso broadcast, a national fitness routine familiar across Japan for almost a century. Fukuda-san came here after a lifetime moving between prison and the streets. He's 94 now and in poor health, so I'm meeting him with his carer, Tomoko, who runs Huboku. Konnichiwa. He never had a normal childhood or education and got into trouble early on. His room feels somewhere between a child's bedroom and his old prison cell. He struggles to explain how his life has come to this. How did Fukuda-san come to live here?
なんでここに来ることになったかね。
刑務所行って帰ってきた。
刑務所に行ってから帰ってきた時にここに来ることになったね。その頃は帰る場所がもうなかったので、もうお金がなくなってしまったら、もう帰るところは警察しかない、もう刑務所しかないと思って、コンビニに行っておにぎりを盗んでみたり。
Desperate to be sent back to jail, Fukuda kept trying to get arrested for petty shoplifting. But the authorities took a different approach, instead giving him a one-way ticket to a train station in his hometown.
もうお腹も空いとったし、もう本当に、駅の中にあるお店のちっちゃい外にゴミ箱があったんだけれども、そこに火をつけてね、放火してしまったんですよね。
Fukuda's bin fire quickly got out of control and he ended up burning down the whole station. He was sentenced to 10 years in jail. Fukuda-san, can you tell me, why did you want to go back to prison?
もう寒くてもう行くとこなかったよ。
Now in a place where he's secure and cared for, he is keen for others to learn from his mistakes.
僕も一生懸命頑張るわ。他の人も頑張っておかい。
福田さんからお母さんみたいって言われるんだけど、84歳でもう一回生き直したいっておっしゃったんですよね。
Elderly people have the highest rates of reoffending in Japan. Nearly 1 in 5 of over 65s released return to prison within 2 years. But there are some organisations trying to help older people. Sanya is one of the poorer suburbs of Tokyo. I'm going to meet a man who's trying to rebuild his life after being sent to prison for shoplifting 15 times. Fujisawa-san works as a cleaner for Sanya Cafe, a charity helping to get elderly and vulnerable people off the streets. Konnichiwa. Hello, Fujisawa-san. I'm Krishnan. Very nice to meet you. He spent 35 years of his life in prison for shoplifting, and with nowhere to turn in his old age, he found one of the few manual jobs open to older ex-cons. What sort of things were you shoplifting?
口紅とかね、手に届くものを。
Why were you shoplifting lipstick? Do you like lipstick?
でもひどいけども、ひどいと思うけど、でも仕方ないなと思う。
Fujisawa-san was stealing tiny items of little use to him, but the prospect of going back to jail was never a deterrent. Sentences for theft here range from a fine to imprisonment for up to 10 years or 20 years for repeat offenders.
万引きでも同じことやってると鉛筆1本でも3年以上勤めなきゃな。
And going back to prison meant at least returning to a community he was comfortable in, unlike the outside world.
昔は苦になってなかった。それと入れば友達がいるわけです。自分の生い立ちとそういうのを受け入れてくれる人。日本のね刑務所では一番自分の身を守らなくていい。
I want to know why older people like Fujisawa-san are reoffending at such a high rate, and why prison is becoming a safe haven for elderly people in Japan. The shame of prison means that when people are released, they've often been abandoned by their family and friends, and so they end up living in a sort of halfway house run by their probation officer. We're on our way to one of these places now. Chiba-san is called a Hagoshi, or volunteer probation officer. The rehabilitation system depends on people like him keeping tabs on ex-prisoners and providing some with a place to stay. How many of the prisoners you help are elderly?
当初始めた頃はそんなに多くなかったんですけれども、今はですね、本当に2割から3割ぐらいが高齢者の方になってきています。
Chiba-san says while the number of crimes here has fallen by nearly 3/4 since the 2000s, the proportion of elderly prisoners has doubled in the same time. Why do you think there's been this rise in elderly people going to prison?
孤立になったりとかですね、やっぱり物価が高騰したりということがあって、高齢者の中でやっぱり年金があまり入ってこなかったりとか、その手持ちのお金がなくて、繰り返してしまってるっていう方ももちろんいらっしゃいますし、今の日本のそのシステムが十分じゃないってみんな分かってるから、つい最近その法律が、その刑務所の中の法律が変わったんです。
Until last year, prison sentences in Japan included mandatory labor. Most inmates worked up to 8 hours a day. Now, the penal code has done away with mandatory labor for all, introducing rehabilitation programs to give prisoners skills to help them cope with life on the outside.
めちゃくちゃ簡単に言うと、更生をするための法律にちょっと変わったんですね。それが110何年ぶりに変わったっていうぐらい。
But the shift in the law is not yet reflected in how most Japanese people think about ex-prisoners and the shame associated with it.
日本はですね、以前からかなりその刑務所から出てきた、いわゆる出所した方に対しての、態度っていうかその扱いというのはすごくひどかったとは思います。やっぱりその刑務所から出て罪を償ったはずなのに、あの人は刑務所から出てきた人だからということで。
One of Chiba-san's residents, who we're calling Tanaka, has just come out after 2 years in jail for shoplifting. It was his first offence. He's in his 80s, and now he's struggling to find anyone who will even rent him a room.
あれ、家ってどうなったんですか？
今ね、向こうの予定不動産にいいんですけど、なかなか難しい。
Tanaka agrees to talk to us if he can hide his face with a mask. He says he lived the rest of his life as an honest businessman with a successful family and a happy marriage. Now he's lost it all. Why couldn't you go back to your family?
離婚しなくちゃ、結局妻はで子供も全部私と切断して、それで私一人で刑務所。
Tanaka says he has stayed away from his family to spare them the shame of his conviction, but that's left him desperately isolated. So does this mean that you have lost your whole family because of this one incident?
迷惑かけない。
The breakdown of multi-generational families living together in Japan is a well-documented trend. Nearly 40% of the population here now lives alone, and more than 6 million of those are elderly people. But some of them have found an innovative way to tackle the loneliness that these social changes have caused. I've come to meet a retired lady who's turning her life experience into a side hustle, offering company and wisdom to young people also living alone who miss their own families.
Hello. Yamada-san. I'm Krish. Very nice to meet you.
Yamada is a grandmother for hire. For just £25 an hour, she'll come over to make a home-cooked meal and offer grandmotherly advice. What are you going to cook tonight?
Well, I'm planning to cook the typical Japanese food.
Yamada has been doing this for just over 2 years now. She says she noticed loneliness rising amongst young people and enjoys helping. Suzuki is a 22-year-old student who lives alone. Yamada wastes no time getting to know Suzuki and sets about making dinner.
じゃあ、今は毎日学校に行ってほとんどお家にはいらっしゃらないよね。
そうですね、日中はあんまり少ないですね。
ちょっとまな板あるかしら。あるわね。よし、よかったわ。
Suzuki's family live quite far away, and from the look of her kitchen, to be honest, I don't think anything's ever been cooked in there before. So Yamada's arrival is absolutely perfect. Suzuki says she has used other rental family services in the past, but it's her grandmother she misses the most. Tell me about your grandma. What's your grandma like?
教えてくれたりとか、おばあちゃんと何年か過ごしてたんですけど、途中から体調とかも悪くなって。
She moved here from the countryside 2 years ago, and the distance from home has left her craving the closeness of family.
もうちょっと行けたらいいなとは思ってるんですけど、あんまり結構忙しかったりとかで行けてなくて、友達いるにはいるんですけど、すごい親身に何でも話せるかっていうとそうではないかなって感じ。
I think we're used to thinking that older people get lonely, but what seems to be happening here is that young people are a bit lonely too.
昔は大きな家族でみんな子供と親と暮らしてましたけど、今は単身一人で暮らす方が若い人たちが多いです。
But the market for families for hire in Japan is small, and it's not the answer for most lonely elderly people. As their multi-generational families have been broken down, many are fending for themselves with no one to take care of them. I want to meet those living below the breadline, without support. The government estimates 70% of the homeless people in Japan are over 60 years old. In a park in Tokyo, I've come to meet people sleeping rough on the streets. Mago runs the Sanya Cafe charity that employed Fujisawa-san, and she often goes out at night in the freezing winter with food for the homeless, most of them elderly.
私はあなたない私だから
It's a bitterly cold night, and Mago's help goes a long way for the people here. One of the men sleeping rough is Takayaki. He says he's seen the cycle of desperation that drives many around him to see prison as a way off the streets.
それともう一人は刑務所から出てきた人がやはりホームレスになるんですけれども、なかなか社会復帰ができない。単純に彼らは食べ物にしてもお金にして非常に困っています。現状が改善されない限り、そういう刑務所に入れられる人が現れるというのは改善されないと思います。
Without an address, there's little welfare, and it's hard to get a job.
仕事がすごい限られる。一度下に落ちたら這い上がれない、なかなか這い上がれないです。この社会。
He sees the consequences of neglect all the time.
ここでは人が死ぬっていうことが当たり前なんです。あそこでも人は死んでますし、このトンネルの中でも人が死んでるんですけど、同時に人が生きているんです。
Since we filmed Under the Bridge, we've been told one of the men we met died in his sleep. So there aren't many options for elderly people released from jail, like Fujisawa-san. I've come back to see how he broke the cycle. You have a lot of things. He's living in a welfare hostel, trying to build the life he never had while he was in prison. You have a lot of posters of dolphins and whales. Is this your favorite?
いるかっていうの家族愛がすごいでしょ。
Did you ever have close relationships?
60まで結婚してなかったんですね。もう出たり入ったりの繰り返しだから社会にいたの2年とか1年とかそういうのが多かったです。
His wife and family have cut him off, and without anyone to guarantee his rent, this is the only option he can afford in a city where housing is expensive. His tiny room is crammed with things, a lot of it just stuff thrown away by others. But for a man who's never really had possessions before, it's all important to him.
社会に出て行くとこがなくて、やっぱお金がないから区役所に行って生活保護を申請した時家賃が11万5,000円で残ったお金っつうと4万ぐらい3万ですかね。それであとは
It's not much, but for Fujisawa-san, it's just enough to keep building his life and stop him from shoplifting again.
自慢できない人生ですよね、僕のは。もう恥ずかしいです。だから俺は刑務所に入ってたってなんでって言われるともうそれ言うの嫌なんですよ。だからただ今は人並みじゃないけどもそれちょっと近いけどもそういう生活できて幸せだなと思ってる。
Before leaving Japan, I'm heading to the Sanya Cafe, where Fujisawa is catching up with his friend Danny and Mago, the support worker I met at the bridge the other night, who has helped them both so much.
ゴミを拾う時拾った後ねバス停のところにいる人が並んでる人がサンキューありがとう僕は今まで感謝されたことがない。
So do you feel part of a community now?
ここで働いてるボランティアさせていただいてることが幸せであり皆さんの役に立ってる。ここにいなきゃ刑務所に入ってる。
For Fujisawa, it seems being a useful part of a community is the biggest reason not to go back to jail. What we've seen here in Japan is a wake-up call to the rest of the world. They're well aware of the problems facing their ageing population here, but like many countries struggling with the cost of welfare and pensions, they just haven't done enough to stop more of them struggling and ending up behind bars. And the pressure is only set to grow. By 2050, nearly 40% of this country's population is predicted to be over 65. Reversing the prison trend by giving older people options and support is one of the biggest challenges facing this nation and the world.